Welcome to Inside the Studio with Greg Wurth. In this episode, I just wanted to have a little fun. I've had this track for a while. A friend of mine had some multi-track 2-inch tapes from back in the mid-'80s of some reggae recordings. And, I've had them for a while, and I thought it would be cool to pull them out and kind of just mess around and set up a mix using some Plugin Alliance stuff, also fabfilter, Empirical Labs, and fractal audio plugins. So I don't know if a lot of you know that, my engineering background starts from reggae music. I was heavily influenced by King Tubby out of Jamaica, who's one of the originators of dub, and Mad Professor in the UK, who brought things to a different level of effects and things like that. And, I figured this would be fun to do it in parts and stuff and just show kind of a breakdown of what a reggae track is like, well, at least from the 80s. And then down the line, I'll do some other videos and show more about dub and things like that, because I think it's really cool. Even if you're not doing that specific genre, some of the techniques sort of carry over and allow you to be very creative and come up with unique ideas for a project. So just to start, I wanted to show you what's going on with the track. It was a 24-track tape, but obviously there's less tracks in here. There's a kick, one channel for kick, one for snare, hi-hat, 3 toms, a mono overhead, a percussion track, which is essentially some claps and stuff like that to enhance the snare, a synth bass, a rhythm guitar, mono piano, and then a synth. And that's it. There's a vocal, but just, I wanted to start with just the core of the track first. So what was interesting was, obviously this was tracked back in the day to tape, and obviously I didn't record it. Just example, I'll show you what this kick sounds like without any of the processing. And it, from what I can gather, it kind of had like a slapback. Like, I don't know if the kick pedal was hitting the head in between initial kick hits or whatnot, but I ended up having to use BX console to gate that so that I can get a tighter sound and more crisp, clear kick drum sound. So this is what it sounds like, just raw. So you can hear, obviously it was recorded with some compression and EQ. It's pretty sculpted for that reggae sound. But aside, obviously, from the slapback, you can hear a little bleed between the tracks, which is, this happens with analog tape, as you may or may not know. All right, so here's what I had going on with BX console. For this, I just used it for the gate to tighten up the track. So here it is. I'll play it with and then without. So that's pretty good. A couple snares come in here and there, but that doesn't bother me too much. It's mostly just getting that slap back that was really, just muddying things up. So after that, I pulled in the Arouser, which is one of my favorite compressors that just came out this year. And what I like about this, aside from the obvious distressor sound that it can get, is that it has this attack modification section, which, in my experience, it just enhances the attack of the track. It can really help make things punchier and just seem like they pop out of the speaker. So I'll demonstrate what's going on here. So obviously there's a level difference. I used it to boost a little gain here, but I also am adding a lot of saturation. So it's kind of just pushing it, making it a little more aggressive and exciting. And again, it was recorded with a bunch EQ on it already, and I thought it was pretty decent. So I just felt like it would be cool to add this Brainworks BX boom just to, enhance the girth of the low end. So I'll show you what that sounds like now. So again, very subtle, but it put it in a pretty good spot, which I'm happy with for this demonstration. I guess since I'm going down the line, I'll explain. I created a room verb here, and I'm using the FAS effects reverb, and they have a drum room or a drum booth reverb, and I'll show you what that sounds like without that engaged. So, you know, it makes it sound like it's in a room. It gives it some space, dimension. Very cool. This is, you know, again, I've done videos on this before, but this is a really great plugin. And what I will mention is what I have going on here is a couple high and low filters before the reverb, because I'm trying to focus the reverb so that it's not adding overtones of frequencies that just end up masking other instruments. So I'm cutting the lows about 329, I'm cutting the highs about 8.5K, and I'll show you what that sounds like without it. So hopefully you can hear that. Without this EQ filter before the reverb, it's kind of just like a dull, boring reverb, and you don't really hear it that well. And this is a trick that is very helpful to place verbs in tracks and allow space for it, because that's what a lot of problems are. Is, you know, people, you know, the first instinct sometimes is to sort of bring up the fader or come over here and add more reverb because they're not hearing it. But what I found is more efficient is to do some filtering like this, so that you just, you know, you only allow the reverb to represent frequencies that you want, and so you tell it to ignore highs and lows at a certain parameter. And obviously this is to taste. I mean, you could do whatever frequencies you want. Generally, you don't really want to add reverb to low end, just because it'll make your low end not tight. So it's a cool trick there. So I have it on a bunch of the tracks, and I use that to build some space around the instruments because they're all dry, and obviously there's no room for the drums. So down the line, here's the snare, and it was recorded with some sort of gate, probably a drummer or something. I didn't need to add any other gates on top of it. I was pretty happy with how it was. So I'll show you how that sounds there. So again, a little leakage from the hi-hat and stuff, but you know, it's not that big of a deal. Sometimes you don't need to isolate things so much because it'll just start sounding chopped like Swiss cheese, and you take away from the integrity of the track. So again, I'm using the arouser here, and I'm adding a little bit of saturation, and I'm using this attack mod to add a little punch. So I'll show you how that sounds. So what that does is it adds a little more snap to it, and it brought out a little bit of the resonance, so that it just sounds a little fatter. So down the line, now I got BX console on here for a little bit of EQ. So I'll show you how that sounds. So what I'm doing here is adding a little bit of 150 to, you know, add some weight to it. I'm cutting a little bit, you know, below 580, like what is that, 575 at a tight Q, a little bit of that, adding a little bit of 4K-ish, 4.5K, and then a little bit of 10K on the top of on a shelf. So just give it a little brightness, a little more presence. Again, it was recorded with the EQ, but just helping it fit a little bit better in the track for this. And then again, I have the room verb on there, so I'll show you how that sounds without it, and then I'll add it back in. So again, it just adds some nice space there. And I have this send here, a long reverb, which is bypassed right now. And this kind of goes over into the dub portion of reggae mixing. You know, essentially what dub is you would take an instrumental from a track that had vocals or whatnot, and you'd create what's called as a dub version. And basically, this is where the engineer kind of uses the console as an instrument. You add effects and reverbs at any given second. So, you know, every once in a while you could add like a reverb splash here and there, or add a long echo of a vocal or on the snare. And it's really cool. I mean, if it interests you, I suggest checking out King Tubby. Just look him up on iTunes or YouTube and you'll hear a bunch of different mixes he's done. It's very cool stuff. So again, you know, I have the same filter before this reverb, and I got another FAS effects reverb here, and I picked a vocal plate, and it's a longer decay time. So basically how that sounds is, just listen here. So it's just kind of a cool thing. And the idea here is, if you're doing it in Pro Tools, you could just easily automate the mute. But in analog, you would do this on the fly. And that's what was really cool about dub mixing, was the creativity. Essentially, each mix was different because you're doing different things at any given time. And you take a reverb send and you twist the knob. And, you know, it's really fun. Okay, so now the hi-hat here. I filtered out a lot of lows here, so I'll show you what it sounded like without anything on it. So what I did, you know, hi-hats are interesting. You know, they have certain mid frequencies that are necessary to the overall body of it, but mostly it's all highs that you need. But this I rolled off around 367 hertz, and it just, you know, it brings a little more focus to the track. Obviously, it's an interesting hi-hat sound. It's a little ringy or whatnot, but that's kind of the style in reggae. You know, they had very specific tones that they were going for back then. So for a little bit of sweetener EQ, I've brought up this Maag, and they have a cool hi-hat preset that I started out with, and then I ended up tweaking a little further on my own. And so what's going on here is, you know, cutting more lows here, 650 a little bit of 2.5, but then we're adding quite a bit on the 20 kilohertz air band here. So it just adds a little bit of air to it and brightness. So let's play it with it. So it's cool. It just gave it a little bit of sparkle. And with the toms, I won't bore you. You know, I'm using BX console, just adding a little bit of top end, a little bit of low end to, you know, bring some presence to it. And same with the overheads. It's not the best recording, but I'll show you what it sounded like. It's a mono overhead, so you know you're not going to get a whole lot of stereo, any stereo spread from the drums aside from panning the toms out and a little bit of this room verb. So basically, the overheads I'm filtering out a little bit above 100 hertz. So, you know, it's cleaning that up a little bit, and then I'm adding a little bit of brightness, sparkle here from the Maag, and a little bit of body, trying to give to it with the 160 and the 650 hertz here. So let's hear this. So that turned out pretty well. I mean, that's a really good improvement over the original. So, okay. And then last part of the drums, this is the percussion that's kind of a snare enhancement. So I'll show you what this sounds like. And again, the arouser just adding a little crack to it. So it adds a little snap, compresses it a little better, sit in the mix. And then here, just adding a little 10K, little 2.5K as well for some brightness. So let's check this out. So there you go. And notice the noise. You know, there's a lot of hiss and stuff. It's what tape sounded like back in the day. All right, so here's the full drum kit now. So, you know, that's pretty nice. Got some punch there and whatnot. Pretty cool for reggae. And here's the bass track now. It's a synth bass. And what I did was I used the BX Opto, which is one of my favorite plugins for bass. So I'll show you what it sounded like flat. So again, you know, messing with this speed to kind of make it pump a little nicely and give it a little dimension there. And, you know, giving decent gain reduction. And I'm using the sidechain filter, which is definitely a must for low-end heavy instruments. And then I'm, you know, doing a little, maybe like 60% mix on there. So sounds really nice. And then I haven't really used this much, this Millennia NS-EQ2 by Brainworks. This is kind of a really cool EQ, and what I liked about it is it has a lot of nice options, and it's got some nice tone. It's a combination of tube and JFET, and here's what it sounds like without it. So it rounded it out a little bit. It made it fatter and a little punchier. It sounds more dimensional. It's really, really nice. So let's hear that with the drums and the bass together. All right, so let's move on to the next thing, which is the rhythm guitar. And this one is a little problematic for me. I mean, as you know, a lot of the work that I do is heavily guitar based. So I'm pretty particular about guitar sounds, and this one is not too great. But this actually lends itself to a perfect example of how one way that I really like using the FabFilter Pro Q2, and that's to do notch filtering to really clean tracks up. So I'll just show you how this rhythm guitar track sounds flat. So, you know, it's not great, and he's got this weird kind of like overtone, like it's, you know, the intonation on the guitar wasn't set very well. So my hope was to, you know, clean this track up as much as I can so that when I start boosting frequencies down the line, I'm not accentuating the stuff that I don't like. And so first of all, again, I'm doing high and low filters here. So I'm filtering out about 200 hertz. This isn't any sort of lead guitar track, so I don't really need much low end in there. Mostly just mids and stuff like that. So, and then I went ahead and I'm filtering out almost 9 kilohertz maybe a little bit below 8800. And this just cleans things up. You know, there's a lot of noise. It's one thing to try is to filter out highs like this on a guitar track, and you'd be amazed at how much it clears it up, and it brings a lot of focus and clarity to a track. And obviously, depending on the part, you know, you might not want to come down too low on the cut there, but a little bit helps. All right, so what I did here too is I got a tight Q on these notches here, and the first one I swept and I found it around 290, and then they kind of work in octaves and whatnot, but sometimes, you know, this had some weird overtones, so sometimes it's not mathematical always. But you know, this one's 630, and then this one's at 2.3 K. So let me go ahead and engage the EQ and see if you can hear a difference there. So it just, you know, it brought a little bit of life to it. It made it a little less annoying. So, you know, it's a very helpful tool. I love that on guitar. I mean, basically you can do this kind of trick on every track, but you just want to be careful with phase shifts and stuff like that. And that's where this comes handy, where you can, you know, put it in natural or linear phase or zero latency mode. So that can really help with that. But definitely give this a try on various instruments, especially stuff that wasn't recorded to the best that it could be. This can really help put you in the right direction when you're starting to mix. All right, and then so next is the arouser, and again, just, you know, adding some saturation there, and I'm using the attack mod to bring out a little more attack there to make it snappier and just feel more dimensional. So let's hear it without. So, you know, the saturation helps quite a bit. It makes it a little warmer and exciting. And then the attack obviously gives a little more punch to it. All right. And then again, I pulled out this Millennia EQ, which just cleaned it up a little bit and brought a little more clarity to the track. So let's hear that. Okay, so, you know, that's pretty good. It's not so bad now. All right, so now the next thing is piano. And so, you know, these are rhythms, so they call, you know, usually in a reggae track you'll have a rhythm guitar and a piano that are kind of essentially doing the same thing. It's kind of a cool blend because the tone of a piano and a guitar, it just gives this cool feel. And just for this, since all the drums are heavily mono, like the overheads and stuff, I use this opportunity. I just pan these rhythms hard left and right to just give a little bit of stereo spread to the overall track. So the piano wasn't too bad. So I didn't feel like I needed to add any of the corrective EQ. Although you could if you wanted, obviously. So let's start with the arouser. I'll show you what it sounds like with and without. Obviously, I'm adding a little gain from it, but it's getting a little tone. It's bringing out the frequencies a little more. It's making just a fatter overall track. So the arouser is really great for that. And next, here's one that I don't use very often, and I thought it was cool to pull it out. I'm very familiar with the API 560 and SPL. Has their hardware version of this, and Plugin Alliance offers it, and it's a great plugin. The Full Ranger, which is a graphic EQ, and basically with this, just adding a little clarity to the track, so a little brightness and whatnot. So let's check that out. So cool, worked very well. So let's hear that all together with the rhythm, guitar and piano in there. So that's nice, starting to sound like a track here. The last instrument here is this really cool synth, and it doesn't play through the whole thing. So let me find the section where it does play, and I'll show you what it sounds like, just dry without any inserts on it. So it's just sort of like just a synth to add a little bit of movement to the track. And what I've done is I've put the same room verb on there, but then I've also added the long verb a little bit, tucked it in to kind of give it its own space, because it doesn't play throughout the whole track. So a lot of times those are good opportunities to add something with a longer decay. So, otherwise if it plays all the time, it'll just kind of muddy up the track. So anyways, down the line, I got the BX Opto on it, which is a great plugin. I'll show you what it sounds like with it. And with this, I messed with the attack time, so it kind of makes it pump kind of feel like punchy, and I thought that was pretty cool. All right, and again, I got this SPL Full Ranger EQ, just, adding a little clarity and brightness to the track. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Let me just play this from the top and let you listen to it before I show you what I got going on the master bus here. So that's pretty cool. I mean, obviously now there's a lot of new tools, like the low tom sounds a little dead. So, I could use a little trick that I've used in the past using the Massey DRT and the Stephen Slate SSD drums to kind of enhance that and make them sound a little more modern, or just in tune, I guess I should say. But for now, I don't need to do it. I think this is a really good starting point to kind of just start feeling out the vibe of the track. And what I got here on the master bus is the classic mid side filter. I'm doing it about 92 hertz. I'll show you what that sounds like without it. So immediately, hopefully you can hear, as I mentioned several times before, this just adds a lot of focus to that low end, and it forces it in the center and just makes it much more clear and audible, and it leaves space for the rest of the track, which gains you overall headroom. Okay, and then I got the lovely Vertigo sound, VSC2 by Brainworks and Plugin Alliance. And this is just a great plugin for the master bus. It's just, a little bit goes a long way. And what I'm using this for is, a little bit of gain adding, but just mostly it's giving this nice glue, and it gives a little bit of punch to the track, which is awesome. So let's check this out without it, and then I'll play it with. So, it's nice glue. It doesn't smear the track. It preserves everything that I want, but it's adding this nice glue and punch to the track. I have to give props to Andy over at Vertigo Sound. He's just a genius This is one of my favorite compressors right now. I'm so stoked that it's available on a plugin format so that I can just use it on everything. But all right, so that's it for today. I hope you learned a lot. Obviously, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. I urge you to go check out some reggae stuff, King Tubby, Mad Professor. If you need any suggestions, just feel free to email me. I'm happy to shoot you some albums to go check out. And please subscribe to the YouTube channel and the newsletter on my website. And thanks for watching Inside the Studio with Craig Wurth, and I'll check you out next time.